Hello and welcome everyone to the launch of the Coffee Barometer 2020, a biannual publication that gives an up-to-date overview on the state of sustainability in the global coffee sector. This launch is a collaboration of, let me name the organization, HIVOS, Conservation International, Oxfam Wereldwinkel, Solidaridad, Ethos Agriculture, and Pakhuis de Zwijger. And right now, I am in Amsterdam. I am in the studio of the Circle. Circle is a platform for the acceleration of the shift toward a circular economy. And I have no mask. And my guest here in the studio has no mask. You will see him later. And also the guests, the speakers who are abroad, they told me to mention this explicitly. They don't wear a mask because they are at home or they are somewhere where they are isolated. So that's the reason why we have not any mask. My name is Barometer, and I am a journalist. I am a writer from Iran, living in Holland for more than 35 years. And as you can hear, English is not my first language. As a matter of fact, after so many years living in Holland, I have no idea what my first or my second language is. But if you can hear me well, and I hope so, then that's good enough for me. And otherwise, just let me know. Just let me know. Enough about me. Let me tell you something about you, dear watchers, viewers at home or at work, about your possible role. So you are watching this, and watching is good, but participating is much better. If you would like to do that, it would be great. In order to do that, there are two rules. First of all, you have to you have to have Google Chrome. That's very important, Google Chrome, in order to participate, not to watch. If you want to participate, you should use Google Chrome. And then you will see a Q&A option, Q&A function. You have to use that to send us a question. And it will be the best if you can address your question to the speaker. So you will have, later you will send a question specifically for Sjoerd or for Caitlin. So that will be make it easier for me to pass your question. So these are kind of technical stuff, and but why are we here? What's the goal of today, of this live cast? The goal of today's event is showing current challenges and potential solutions within the global coffee sector when it comes to this path to sustainability. So that's the goal. Possible solutions, current situation, because we are going to sustainability. And we'll start off this live cast by having an overview about the findings of the barometer in the last 2 years and the key trends. And after that, we will hear some solutions. And after that, we will have a live conversation with 4 people abroad. First of all, we will start off here in the studio with Sjoerd Panhuisen. He's the initiator of and the author of the Coffee Barometer. And then, and I hope now you can see the people online with us, we will see the great, impressive lineup of the speakers. So let's go, for example, to New York City. Caitlin Cordes, she is the researcher from Columbia Center of Sustainability Investment. They did a great research published in 2019. Caitlin, would you be so nice to wave to us, Caitlin? Yes, I can see your hand. And then we will have a conversation with 3 people, with Vanusia Nogueira. She is the director of the Brazilian Specialty Coffee Association. Vanusia, would you please wave to us? So we can, yes, Juanicia. And then we'll have Juan Antonio Rivas. Today he will represent the coffee traders, exporters and importers. And he's with Olam International, one of the leading food and agri-business with more than 25,000 customers. Juan Antonio, would you please wave to us? Yes. And then we'll have Mario Cerruti. Mario Cerruti is the Chief Institutional Relations and Sustainability Officer with Lavazza. And I don't have to tell you anything about Lavazza, maybe only that they are representing an annual generated sales of $2.2 billion a year. So, Mario, would you please be so kind to wave to us? Okay, that's Mario. And so we will start. But I have to tell you one important thing. Today, of course, we know there is a big role, there is a big part for consumers and governments. That's very important. But since the key, the heart of the issue of this report is about the industry, so we will mainly talk about them. As I said, customers, consumers, and governments, very important. But today's main subject will be about people like producers, about traders, about roasters, about retailers. So that's the main issue we will talk about. And if you would like to ask a question, again, you should go. You should use the function Q&A. And having said that, right now I have a question for you. As a matter of fact, 2 questions. So I hope you can manage to. So for the audience, so are you ready for my 2 questions? Because we want to know, who is watching this program. So the first question is, which part of the industry do you represent? And then you will see 5 options. So 5 options for you, A, B, C, D, E. Whether you are in the industry, for example, you are a roaster, or a trader, or a retailer. B, you are a producer or producer representative. C, civil society or research. D, government, or E, other. So these are the options. I'm just because I don't see whether any results are coming or not. So I'm just looking at to the floor manager, Hilda. Can we go on to the next question? Is it possible to go to the final question for the audience? Yes. Okay. So now I'm going to the final question. As for maybe one of the most important questions for you, coffee lovers. How much coffee are you drinking during the lockdown? So A, is it less than before? Or B, is it the same than before, same as before, or is it more than before? So A, B, C. And I'm just looking to the camera and wait a little bit. Okay. I don't know, no, because now you are giving the answer. How about you, Sjoerd? Are you drinking more or less coffee?
I think during writing the report, a bit more.
A bit more, yeah.
Yes.
And you wrote the report during the lockdown?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you are drinking more. Okay. And I'm just looking again to our floor manager here in Amsterdam, Hilda. Can we go on to the conversation right now, or shall we wait a little bit for the final answers? Okay, we can go to the conversation. Okay, Sjoerd Panhuizen, you are with Ethos Agriculture, and you are the initiator and the lead author, the lead writer of the Coffee Barometer 2020. You are working in this business, coffee business, for how many years?
I would say about 15. More than 15 years already.
More than 15 years.
Yes.
And you look to me like a young gentleman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, no
nice
problem. Okay, so it means that this is the big bunch of your lifetime. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just wonder. Of course, we'll talk about your report in a second. But what what is the motive? What drives you? What's the engine?
I think it's mainly the big world behind coffee. There's such a huge world, and everything seems to be interconnected to coffee. And for example, I'm especially interested in adaptation to climate change, how agriculture can be adapted to climate change as one of the big questions of our time. But if you look at coffee, that's really the laboratory where a lot of these ideas are already tested and tried out and for years and years. And the more you know about coffee, the more you learn, the bigger the sector becomes, and it's still interesting. So.
Wait a minute. Are you saying, and I really like this idea, are you saying that when you know everything about the coffee, from moment A to the final moment that I'm drinking the coffee, if you can research that, then you know everything about climate change, maybe?
Well, that is maybe a very big claim, but at least my feeling is indeed knowing everything from production till consumption, that it brings so much to the table that actually touches upon economic, social, environmental issues all the time, and that's where my interests are. So yeah, it's coffee all the time, indeed.
Yeah, tell me what kind of coffee you drink, and I'm telling you what you are, what kind of man you are or woman.
More or less. Yeah.
More or less. Very interesting. Very interesting. And you know, we will watch a short animation film, 1.5 minutes, and it's about the main message of the report. And after that, we will have a conversation. Sure. So I'm asking the floor manager to start the animation right now.
Here's the thing. Coffee companies defined big sustainability commitments for 2020. Unfortunately, the Coffee Barometer concludes that most commitments are not being delivered. Is it because they don't have money? Well, the largest part of global coffee revenues is earned by the top 10 roasters, who received $55 billion in 2019. In the meantime, coffee farmers only get a fraction of this amount, are hardly able to cover their basic needs, and are under constant pressure to cut costs at the expense of the environment or by reducing wages. The coffee sector loves to talk. In roundtable events, major sustainability issues are frequently discussed, but this does not translate into meaningful change. No higher farmer income, no better labour standards, no adaptation to climate change. It's time for action. There are plenty of ideas and tools to make coffee production more sustainable. Even if there is uncertainty about the outcomes of our actions, this is not an excuse to do nothing. The industry has to take collective responsibility and live up to their own commitments. Want to learn more? Go to www.coffeebarometer.org.
Okay, back in our studio in Amsterdam. So, by the way, you already know the answers, but just to come back to the first questions in the beginning. So, about 33% of the people who are watching are working in the industry, and about 43 in civil society, 10 for government, and 13 for others. And most of people, they drink same amount of coffee as before, about 60%, and 10% is drinking less, and 30%, 30, more than before. Okay, shoot. I have a couple of questions for you for the next 10 minutes. As I said in the beginning, the main issue of the report is not about consumers or the government. Of course, you have them because they are important players in the chain. But why is the main focus of your report is on industry players?
Yeah. Well, I think this is already the sixth edition of the Coffee Barometer, and actually always the same question has been the starting point. Like, can we say something about what are companies saying they are doing, and can we see in practice what are they actually doing? And that has been the red thread in all the barometers, and of course we can look at that question from different angles. This time we really focus on the top 10 roasting companies. Of course, those companies, compared to the report from 2018, the top 10 has changed, but we try to stick to a top 10 to make it also a bit manageable.
And those top 10, excuse me for interrupting, how big are they? How many, how big of crunch of market are they representing?
Together they represent around 35% of all the green coffee that is being roasted into consumer coffee. So big, let's say 1/3 of the whole global coffee market. And behind that idea, by focusing on the top 10, is of course also the idea if the top 10 moves into a certain direction, takes steps into the direction of transforming the sector, making it more sustainable, then the whole coffee sector itself will move and in that same direction.
Yeah, so 35%, they represent 35% of the world's coffee, and we are talking about how much money, approximately?
Maybe we can show a slide that we have produced for the report.
So have a slide.
Yeah, so here we can see indeed that the top 10 together, it's good for $55 billion in revenue in 2019. So in the earlier reports, we always looked at the volume. How much volume do these companies bring to the market? This time we also included revenue, and it also shows quite some differentiation in how to look at companies and their market share. For example, we can see that for Nestle, Starbucks, GDE are much bigger actually than a lot of the other companies in the top 10, but still all of the companies in the top 10 are around are multi-billion dollar companies. So in potentially very important players that could really use their power to move the market also in a certain direction.
And are they doing that? I mean, what or how, should I say, are the main industry players doing so far? And is that enough, in your opinion?
I think, as we show in the report, a lot of companies are working on a lot of different areas of sustainability. I think what is missing, and that's also what we are noting in the report, is really sustainable. If we talk about sustainability, we talk about economic sustainability, social sustainability, environmental sustainability, but the examples that we get are often just elements of that. So smaller projects focusing on economic aspects, or bigger projects focusing on climate change, and of course there's a lot of interrelation, etc. But the difficulty is that the sector itself still does not really have a shared vision, a shared approach, although we do have a long history of maybe 20, 30 years of trying and testing all kind of different methodologies, IDs, tools, certification. So on the one hand, the expectations are very high of all these IDs, and a lot is also working. But the difficulty is really how to move to scale, and actually who's paying for it.
Let me take one thing off. You said the industry, they don't have shared values. Did you say that?
No, I don't think it's not shared value. It's a shared vision.
Shared vision, yes. And by that, what do you mean? What kind of elements should be in a shared vision?
Well, for example, I expect all these companies have an idea where they want to be in 10 years. And this
me too, as a matter of fact. It sounds very, very logical,
everyone now.
Yeah.
But if you look at the challenges and actually the risks in the sector, if we only look at climate change or for that matter what we show in the other graph, the challenges that we have with the very low coffee market price, which actually is so low for the last 3 years that many producers are in a lot of countries producing under their own production price. These are all risks the sector has to cope with in some or another way, and those risks are known. They have been there for as long as we've been producing
as long
coffee.
we have coffee, you know,
course,
from East Africa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the discussions are also changing, and also the political field, the international political field around. For example, the adoption of the Paris Accords, the Sustainable Development Goals. So that field is changing, and actually these companies can really play a role to get us into the right direction by really putting their weight behind it, and also probably really push investments also in sustainability.
Yeah. Shoot, we have 2 questions for you, and as I said, you know, I really like
Sure.
people are watching
Of
and they
course.
take the effort to send a question. So please allow me to pass you the question. Shoot, is the total revenue? Is this total revenue or only on coffee? Starbucks sells a lot of milk, sugar, etc. Probably even more than coffee.
Yeah.
That's a question about the first slide.
Yeah. A very, very important point.
Yeah.
And I think that also touches upon the whole issue that we deal with the coffee barometers, also about the actual how transparent is the sector. Because we always have said we cannot talk about sustainability if we do not know what we are talking about together, right? And we all talk different things. And one of the big challenges is transparency, because we have asked all these companies in a long questionnaire, quite detailed questions about what they are doing. And we also looked at financial data in the public domain. And actually we came up with this list that you see here on this slide and what we published in the Barometer. Of course, there's a caveat, and I know, for example, with Starbucks, the total revenue of Starbucks is around 26.5 billion in 2019, and their beverages division is 16 billion, but the beverages division, it's not completely clear if that's only coffee or if that also includes smoothies and whatever they sell.
Hot chocolate or tea.
So that's possible, but we expect that to be a small element of that 16 billion. But indeed,
you don't know.
We don't know exactly.
Yeah.
And we have some more companies, we had to make estimates because they are not sharing that type of information.
So transparency is a big
Transparency
issue.
is, for us, it's the issue, yes.
Okay, shoot, I have about 3 more minutes for the conversation with you, and fortunately, or should I say unfortunately, there is another question for you. What can you say about the other 66% of the market? So can you summarize that? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, yeah, good point. Well, the other side of the market, it's probably covering all the other coffees that are out there. Of course, when focusing on the top 10, they have well-known brands. But of course, the market is huge, and there are a lot of, even walking from the station to here, I saw so many small coffee shops still selling takeaway coffees. But so it includes specialty coffees, but also probably unknown brands in the supermarket in Uganda, or for that matter in Brazil. So it's a big world.
Big blend. Just to use another term. Yeah, big blend. Okay. There is one more question, and I have a final question for you as well. So this question, if you compare the value versus volume, these seems to be a wide range. Do you do the companies that have a relative high value also have achieved a higher level of compliance to their 2020 commitments? Of course, yeah.
I think it's a good point, and it's also something we looked at. We do see, for example, indeed, in the report we explained that into more detail. Of course, that Nestle, Starbucks, Lavazza, that they really translate part of that value also into more sustainable practices in the countries where they are procuring their coffee. But it's not said that it's a one-on-one match, I would say.
Okay, final question for you. I know it's a big question. But thank God you are here to answer the big questions, you know. What's the most important message of this Barometer 2020 when it comes to the industry? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think the commitments that we see of all the companies, they are sincere, and all these companies are also collaborating and trying to work together in multi-stakeholder initiatives. And we have another slide where we show those initiatives. But what we also see is that actually we are learning together, but we do see that we need to raise the bar, because if in the last 10 years we clearly see maturing discussion in the coffee sector, but it really needs to go one step further, and that means that we need to define better the roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders involved, but also with those roles and responsibilities, there's also that ask for, okay, how are we going to really to make it happen, to make it work? Because I did expect 15 years ago when I did the first Barometer that 2020 would be somehow the final conclusion of, well, we are there. The sector is completely sustainable, everything is working well. But it's, if we look now at the report, and of course also with the situation with COVID and how that affects coffee farmers, we are far from getting even close, and we really need to do an extra effort altogether.
So you just call them up to do action.
Yeah, really, and also put your money where your mouth is.
Put your money where your coffee is.
That's another way to phrase it.
You stay with us during the conversation. So if you have any questions for Leo, for other panel members, please go ahead. Unfortunately, I see that there are more questions coming for you, but I have to go on to the next parts of the program. Is it okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and I will pass the question later to you.
I will try to answer them.
Okay, cool. So the next part we are going to call to New York, and I will have a conversation with Kathleen Cordes. She's a researcher from the Columbia University Center of Sustainable Investment, and she was one of the researchers that contributed to the study published in 2019 by Jeffrey Sachs and the Columbia University. And the aim of that study was to research about how to achieve sustainable development in the coffee sector. And right now she's in New York. And Kathleen, thank you so much for being with us. Before I give you the floor to give us a presentation, I'm just wondering, could you follow the conversation with Sjoerd here in Amsterdam? And if yes, what was the most important thing, singular or plural, you heard? Just very briefly.
Yes, absolutely. I think first I'll just say congratulations to Sjoerd and to the other contributors and publishers of the Barometer. It's really insightful and it's a really useful resource. I think it's also a very sober reflection on the current state of coffee sector sustainability. I was really struck, Shoot, by your last comment here as well about how you thought, 15 years ago it would be an entirely different situation right now. And the general story from what you were presenting today and from what the Barometer says as well, to me, seems to be that everyone knows there are massive sustainability problems in the coffee sector. We've seen fairly widespread voluntary sustainability efforts to address them, but the results have been really disappointing, and much more needs to be done much faster to make a real difference. I was thinking about what Shoot said about what the situation was 15 years ago. I was contrasting this as well with an article that someone sent me the other day that was from 2002 in The Guardian, talking about the price crisis at the coffee price crisis at the time, and Oxfam's campaign to get fairer prices for producers at that point. And comparing that situation with the situation we've seen for the last few years, it seems to me that the structural issues are very similar to what they were nearly 2 decades ago, that the plight of producers seem very similar to what they were nearly 2 decades ago. And so the main differences, to my mind, are first that companies do seem to be much more willing to publicly talk about the need to support more sustainability for producers in particular. And then second, there's really a critical need right now to reflect on why all of these years of sustainability efforts, whether by the individual companies or by the multi-stakeholder initiatives or the voluntary sustainability standards, have ultimately left most producers in the same situation they were during this last price crisis, as price takers in a global market that generally does not value all of the value that the producers are providing to the coffee sector. So, I think the Barometer makes a pretty compelling argument to do about the need to do much more to affect meaningful change. The Barometer, I read through it, and it talks about a few recently proposed solutions, which it described as out-of-the-box ideas, and noted the need to understand how those ideas could actually be translated into practice. And one of those ideas came from a report that I co-authored in 2019 with Professor Jeffrey Sachs and other colleagues at Columbia University and at the London School of Economics. The report was commissioned by the World Coffee Producers Forum, and also some of the research there was supported by Lavazza. So thank you very much, Lavazza, for that support as well. And in that report, the one of the main solutions that we put forward was for a global coffee fund, which the Barometer talks about. And our research found, we examined the structural challenges that were leading to the sustainability crisis in the coffee sector, with a particular focus on producer welfare and incomes, and also on the effects that climate change is already having and is likely to have in the near and longer terms. To no one's surprise, we found a very stark contrast between, on the one hand, the millions of coffee producers who were being absolutely crushed by impoverishing prices that were being paid for coffee, and producers who stand to bear the greatest risks when it comes to climate change and addressing what climate change will do to coffee production. And then on the other hand, a very flourishing roaster and retailer sector, one that's profitable and the one that talks a lot about sustainability. And in our report, in doing the research, we explored a number of potential solutions to try to address these structural challenges and the situation that producers found themselves in. And we ultimately suggested 3 complementary ideas. One of them, and the first idea, the solution that we suggest, are national coffee sustainability plans to enable strategic efforts to support producers and to address climate change in producing countries. The second, which is the one that people talk the most about, is a global coffee fund to fill critical financing gaps for sustainability investments in coffee production and coffee producing countries. And then we also did talk about additional efforts in producing countries that could help producers capture more of the retail price of coffee, including things like more direct to consumer models, which I do think are worth exploring and considering seriously. But today I will talk primarily about the Global Coffee Fund and explain it a little bit more, because there are a lot of questions. The Barometer itself says that there was some skepticism about it. So I'm happy to provide some details now, and always happy to talk about it more later as well. But the idea with the Global Coffee Fund was to create this fund that's financed in part by the main coffee industry actors like the roasters, retailers, and traders, with those contributions then being used to leverage additional public financing from coffee producing governments, from development partners, and from others. The fund would aim to fill the largest sustainability funding gaps in the global coffee sector and support the implementation of these national coffee sustainability plans, which I just noted we also suggested as a solution. And that would allow some context-specific sustainability efforts within each coffee-producing country. Among other things, the Global Coffee Fund could serve as a price stabilization fund of sorts without the need for supply management, which is, I think, a particularly tricky challenge when it comes to thinking about price issues. But it could serve as this form of price stabilization fund by providing direct income transfers to smallholders during sustained periods of low prices. But it could also help support a number of other collective public goods and other really necessary services that could help producers navigate both the global markets and the challenges that come with them and the climate crisis, such as supporting affordable insurance options to reduce climate-related risks, disaster relief funds, affordable on-farm financing, even supporting efforts to improve producers' market opportunities. We believe that it's absolutely possible to establish and administer such a fund. While coffee would be the first commodity to attempt this type of pre-competitive, collaborative, collective effort on such a wide scale, there are examples and mechanisms both outside and within the coffee sector that could provide some inspiration. For example, in our report, we do provide a number of operational and governance suggestions, which we modeled in part on those used by the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. We obviously are not suggesting that we use that Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria as an exact blueprint for what a Global Coffee Fund would look like. They're completely different contexts, completely different challenges. But that fund, we did flag it because the fund provides an example both of how large amounts of multi-stakeholder funding can be channeled to address complex problems and challenges, and also of how a large global fund can be structured and governed. And then, as one example from within the coffee sector of how a mechanism for how funds could be collected, one option, at least in some countries, might be the use of a checkoff program, which is a mechanism that World Coffee Research has piloted in the coffee sector. And through this checkoff mechanism, traders could add suggested contributions to the invoices that they provide to roasters and retailers, who would then pay those contributions to the fund at the same time that they pay their invoices, just as one way of facilitating broad participation required for the fund and using mechanisms that already exist in the coffee sector to help address some of the structural, administrative, and operational challenges that could arise. For our research and in the report, we estimated how much money might be required to make serious, considerable progress on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in coffee growing regions. We arrived at a figure of approximately US $10 billion a year, but this does include funding for a number of public goods and services that are absolutely the responsibility, first and foremost, of governments, like health and education in coffee-producing regions. And so for that reason, our report suggested a goal of trying to raise 1/4 of that amount, $2.5 billion a year, through pre-competitive private sector contributions to the Global Coffee Fund. The Barometer, in the report I read, noted that this amount has been met with a lot of skepticism in the sector, and I acknowledge that it sounds like a lot. However, we calculated that this would amount to less than half of 1 US cent per cup of coffee sold. I would pay less than half of 1 US cent for every coffee cup that I drank. And I imagine a lot of you watching this would also pay that amount. So shouldn't we ask the profitable companies to do that as well? And if this amount is really the sticking point for a lot of actors, I would like to hear then coffee sector actors counter with what they think would be a more appropriate amount, rather than simply dismissing this idea out of hand. I will say one potential criticism of the fund is that it is essentially a form of charity rather than an overhaul of structural inequities and power imbalances within value chains. I absolutely understand that perspective. We suggested the fund, however, with the belief that downstream and midstream actors, such as roasters, retailers, and traders, must fulfill and have a co-responsibility for achieving sustainable coffee production, and that they must shoulder more of the risks that currently fall too heavily on producers alone, whether those are price risks or climate risks. And so we suggest that a global coffee fund should be seen in that light, not as charity, but rather as an avenue for fulfilling that co-responsibility that downstream and midstream actors have. We get into a lot more details about the fund in the report, so I won't belabor it more here, although I'll say that my co-authors and I would be happy to talk about it with anyone who's interested. And I'll just end my remarks by stating that the Global Coffee Fund is obviously only one solution that has been proposed. We think it's viable. We think it's worth serious consideration. But for companies that are not interested in participating in a pre-competitive collaborative effort, I think the clear alternative for them is changing business practices within their own supply and value chains. And so I would thus expect that companies who are not interested in the fund would instead be making commitments to and providing evidence of concrete efforts within their own supply chains to improve producer incomes and livelihoods, particularly during periods of low prices and in light of climate change pressures. For example, I'd expect companies to make commitments to paying prices that cover production costs and decent wages for workers and that enable producers to live with dignity. I'd also expect commitments to other business practices that make companies good partners to producers, like the commitments to long-term relationships with producers, commitments to using fixed price contracts when appropriate. This might also include commitments to buy more or even to buy only certified coffee that supports better producer incomes. To my mind, one of the great tragedies of the voluntary sustainability standards is simply that so much coffee is produced under those standards, but not sold under those standards, leaving producers and their organizations to bear the costs associated with that production, but unable to benefit from associated premiums or other benefits that could arise if they could sell under that standard. And then a final thought, going back to what Shoot was saying and what the Barometer talks about, is that transparency, to my mind, transparency is never the end goal, but it is a really important means to an end. And I think that transparency around prices paid to producers could be a really useful step towards moving sustainability commitments along. There's been some really interesting transparency initiatives to watch in the coffee sector. And I think that more disclosure, particularly disclosure that's easily accessible to consumers of how much producers receive, could prompt a greater reckoning within the coffee sector when it comes to prices and incomes and livelihoods. So I've kept my remarks focused on a few things that coffee companies could and should be doing because that's the topic of this discussion today. But I'll just say that I do think there's a number of other actors who have important roles to play and a number of other approaches that can be explored. So I really look forward to seeing where the coffee sector goes from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. My God, you are really a great speaker, a great talker. I have a question for you right now. We have room for just probably one question because we have only 3 minutes. Caitlin, looking at smallholder substance farmers, would you see the main challenge to focus on productivity and good agriculture practices in respect to the coffee trees, or should the emphasis rather be on diversification and focus on alternative or food crops?
Yeah, it's a great question. You could say, I think it's fairly context specific. I do think that our research, other research shows that there is some minimum level of land that you probably need to be economically viable. And if you don't have that amount of land, then you're probably never going to be economically viable at the prices that coffee traditionally and historically has. And so if you are, actually subsistence and you're operating on a very small amount of land, I don't think the definitely you should not only be focusing on increasing productivity of coffee. And I do think that diversification is absolutely critical for a lot of coffee farmers. However, I think the diversification point is a little bit tricky in that when you look at coffee farmers and their particular situation, diversification often is an important hedge and an important way of making sure that they are able to survive low global coffee prices. But I also think that it's an easy out for the coffee sector to point to diversification rather than also thinking about the ways in which prices and how coffee itself is valued might need to change as well. So hopefully that answers the question. Productivity sometimes is one step amongst many, but diversification sometimes is one step amongst many. But also thinking about it in the whole complex set of challenges that exist for coffee producers.
Okay. Kathleen, thank you again for your contribution to this conversation, and I wish you great next 6 days to the presidential inauguration in next week, and go in peace and keep up your great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And Sjoerd, back in the studio, there were more questions for you.
Sure.
And just very briefly, question. What's your view on certifications? Do you think that there is a reproduction of global North domination?
Let me rephrase the question.
Yeah, rephrase it in your own way.
I think the idea is indeed that certification is being pushed towards the farmers from consumers or organizations in the north.
Yeah.
I think it's indeed an element that certification started to fill the void where law was not implemented or there was not enough trust. But at the moment, I think certification also has come a long way. It's not a static tool, and a lot has improved. And I think a lot of the stakeholders also in the producing countries are currently part of defining the standards themselves, the system themselves. But I have to agree with what Caitlin also remarked, is that the big question is, yes, we have certification and we have all these nice tools, but if nobody's actually buying the coffee that's being produced under these standards, we can have the best standards in the world, but it's not going to help anybody, and there will be a lot of disappointment if you invest in these standards but do not reap the fruits.
Okay, I get it. I understand. I get it. Okay. For the final 30 minutes, we will have a conversation with three people in yeah, am I right? Two different continents. So we are going to South America and to Italy. And we'll start off, so please allow me to introduce them nicely. Vanusia Nogueira. Director of Brazilian Specialty Coffee Association. So not the Coffee Association, but the Specialty Coffee Association, and one of the key people behind the work of the World Coffee Producer Forum. And that's an initiative created by the key producer countries to determine the agenda from the producer side to promote sustainability in the sector. And she's the daughter of the coffee farmers herself. And what they are doing, she's representing farmers through her contribution to the World Coffee Producer Forum. And then the other speaker is Juan Antonio Ribas. He's representing for today. He's representing the coffee traders. So we are talking about the exporters and the importers, and who are selling coffee to the roasters. And he worked for Olam International, one of the big players in the agribusiness supplying. And they are having more than 25,000 customers, and they have a network of about 5 million farmers. And the final speaker in the panel will be Mario Cerutti, and he's with Lavazza for more than 35 years working there, and he's the Chief Institutional Relations and Sustainability Officer at Lavazza. And I don't have to tell you, but then again, Lavazza is representing 2.2 billion revenue in 2019. So I have a question for three of you, and I will start with Venusia, and then I would like to hear Juan Antonio, and then finally Mario. The question is, what do you think about the solution raised regarding the Global Coffee Fund, as we just heard? So what do you think about that? And is it a good solution? What are the pros and cons of this this solution? And if it is not working, in your opinion, what other solutions do you propose? Venusia. I don't hear you. Wait a minute. I don't hear you. So I don't know whether the people at home hear you or not.
Can you hear me now?
Now I hear you. Now I hear you. Please start again.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me to be here with you today. And it's a proud and huge responsibility to be here representing all the coffee growers in the world. The Coffee Producers, World Coffee Producers Forum decided to contract Professor Sachs and the Columbia University team, as Kathleen said, to give to us a neutral position or a neutral photo diagnosis about the coffee sector. We thought that we needed to have someone that was not directly involved on the sector, helping us to get this photo and to get us and to help us to find some kind of solutions. I was with Kathleen 1.5 years ago in Campinas during our Congress, our World Coffee Producers Forum, when Professor Sachs launched publicly the idea of the fund. It's a controversial idea. We know that it's a very new and disruptive idea, but we think it's possible to put it in place. And I think the major point of the fund, and the major point of this idea in the report, it's at least we have a number. We have an estimation about how much we need to really address the needs of this sector to achieve a good sustainability in social, environmental, and mainly for the producers, the economic sustainability.
Okay, can I go on to Juan Antonio with the same question? Yeah. Okay, Juan Antonio, please tell me, you are with Olam, what are your ideas about Global Coffee Fund as a solution?
Thank you, and thank you again for inviting me to this launch of the Barometer, which I think is a very good contribution to our sector, as has been in the past as well. So I have always found the idea of the Global Coffee Fund very interesting. I think it's something that needs to get more traction in terms of putting some details around how it could work and what kind of governance and what kind of organization is required for it to work. I think the most striking part of the recommendation or the proposal for me is just that a very, very small extra cost of a cup of coffee can generate very significant resources that, if we find the right mechanisms to channel those resources to the coffee producers, to the most vulnerable coffee producers, it can really go a very long way to ensure long-term sustainability for the sector. So I think the estimates that were made in the report are very interesting in that sense. The other part of your question was, what other ideas could be out there? And I would like to mention one that actually Olam put forward some time back, which was that we believe that we should relook at a price stabilization, at a global price stabilization fund, but a fund that needs to work differently than other efforts that have been made in the past. This fund should be counter-cyclical, if you want, so that we can contribute through that fund to reduce production in the world when prices are low, when we are going in a low price cycle. And how do you do that? By giving incentives to coffee growers to renovate their plantations with new varieties, with more resistant varieties, more resilient varieties, higher yielding varieties. But then when you do that, you remove some of the production when prices are low, and then that production comes back to the market when the prices have recovered. And I think that construct of a price stabilization fund should also be looked at in greater detail. And again, it requires a multi-stakeholder approach. This is not a one-company proposal. It requires that we sit together, a lot of the stakeholders in the industry, and look at the details as well. Okay. So I think that could be another potential solution.
Okay, thank you, Juan Antonio. Please allow me to ask the same question to Mario. Mario, what's your take on this notion of global fund?
Yes. Well, let me first of all thank all of you for allowing me to inviting me to participate, and thank you very much to Jord and all the other people for the Coffee Barometer. I think is really a very important publication for developing the knowledge of the whole coffee sector. And also let me thank Kathleen for remembering that we were also supporting financial supporter, but also a little bit more than that, because we did a lot of work with some of the author in the providing the data and the data set for the study, and the idea behind that was really to contribute to a kind of, let's say, third-party point of view, third-party academic thinking about the coffee crisis that is really, let's say, unfortunately in our sector since many years. As you remembered, I am already quite a while involved in coffee, so maybe this is the reason why you Bahram, didn't call me a young gentleman, which I totally agree with you, by the way. But the coffee crisis is actually a little bit more than a crisis. Normally, crisis means something that is a temporary, limited. And in coffee is probably getting a little bit too structural. So having said that, just to fix a little bit the scenario, I think that the idea of the fund per se is a good idea. I also honestly have to say that I really think there are a huge number of issues and problems and constraints that have to be addressed. Just to take one, for example, 10 billion is about 50% of the value of the whole exports, 40 or something percent, depend on the coffee prices, of course. So to imagine that a roaster can afford such a percentage difference, it means that yes, you support the coffee market, and then next year you go broke because you are totally out of the market. So is honestly completely unrealistic, and also is unrealistic to talk about contribution per cup, which is fine when we talk about coffee served in a bar or in a cafeteria, etc. And maybe the parameter is not so correct when we talk about coffee in home consumption and so on and so forth. So the good part of the story is that the coffee world is so diverse, so let's say variegated, that is very interesting, but is also very complex. So having said that, the fund, let's say my focus point on the fund is that is good. The idea is very good, but we have to work on the details where normally the devil is. And the other level is that the Coffee Fund is addressing structural problems, which are not problems necessarily linked to the coffee. When we talk about infrastructure, when we talk about training, when we talk about farmers' resilience, which are all issues that I totally share, I totally agree are fundamentally important, but it's totally unrealistic as well to imagine that is one specific sector. Could be coffee, could be bananas, could be cocoa, could be anything you want. But to imagine that is one specific product that has to address this problem is unrealistic. It is more an issue of the whole country. It's more an issue to help development in a broader sense, or let's say agricultural development in many countries. So for that sake, again, I think it's a good idea, but is a much wider idea that only the coffee can do. But what is
I understand, Mario. I understand your point. Let's talk about another issue, namely transparency. May I ask this question for you, for three of you, but starting again with Vanusia. Vanusia, how transparent are you in your own company, and what are you reporting? What are you reporting not? And put it another way is, are you doing well with the commitments that you make? And as I said, the same question for the two other gentlemen in a minute.
I think this question, it's more for Mario and Juan Antonio than me, because I'm in the producer side, and here we are very transparent with everything we do. Because we do such a small part of this. We are the raw material for all of them. Okay. And we talk about sustainability in the three pillars all the time. And we show this to the world.
Okay, Vanusia, I like your modesty. So that's good, you know. So let's pass the question to the other gentlemen. So let's start with Juan Antonio. How transparent are you, and when it comes to your commitments that you have made, how far you reach those commitments?
Yeah, so as a company, Olam has been on a journey, if you want, to increase transparency. I think we are a very transparent company. As an example, at the corporate level, we have been reporting using our results, using the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, I think for the last 8 years, where we report things like greenhouse gas emissions, human rights, employees, etc. at the corporate level. In the coffee division of Olam, which is one of the divisions of Olam, we have recently launched a very comprehensive sustainability strategy that has very clear goals, very clear targets, has defined clear KPIs up to 2025. And we have committed to report on progress on those commitments on an annual basis. So I think we are a very transparent company. We're a publicly traded company, publicly listed company, which also brings some responsibility in that sense as well. Maybe finally, we have, in the last 2 years, launched a platform, a sustainable product platform, if you want, that we call At Source, which is basically our way of delivering to our customers products with all the information behind the production of those products. So in this case, coffee. We do this through a digital platform where we provide more than 100 different metrics related to sustainability that are related to the coffee that we are trading. So these are some examples of how we address transparency. And again, we keep increasing. I would like to simply reiterate that I completely agree with what I mentioned before. I think transparency is key to all of this because we need, as a sector, to be able to measure and monitor progress.
Okay.
And that's not always. Sorry.
Excuse me. So can we go to Mario? How about the notion of transparency in your company?
Well, in general, I think that I share And I subscribe the idea that, of course, transparency is very important. We think are rather transparent. We talking about sustainability. We are publishing. We just published the 6th report that is done according to the Global Reporting Initiative standards. So it's a UN-defined standard, which is exactly what all the companies that want to do a social reporting should do. There are 140 pages of information. So let's say if you really read in details the report, you probably know more things about Lavazza that I do, or many of the people working Lavazza do. So from that point of view, transparency is absolutely a given. And again, this do not imply that we necessarily agree with the position of somebody else, etc., etc. No, but again, so has to be clearly defined what we mean for transparency. But again, in principle, I think it's a good point.
Cool. Back in the studio, Sjoerd would like to add something to this point of this issue of transparency. Sjoerd.
Yeah, well, of course, I think it's a relevant question for our guests. And on the other hand, both Olam and Lavazza and a couple of other companies are probably the exception to what we have seen in our report, where we still, after 10 years, see this immense struggle with having access to actually very simple data points, or just figuring out how much progress has been made in the sector. So I have to agree. I think Antonio said that also the sector itself also has to raise the bar. And I think these companies who are setting that example can also challenge their peers to come up to that level of transparency, because it's essential for the whole sector. It's not on an individual level anymore.
As I said, we have mentioned a couple of times, we are emphasizing the role of the industry in your report. But me, as just the average Joe, drinking my coffee, it would be great if I could know which companies are transparent, toward these goals or not. Then I know, okay, I prefer Lavazza above the other company, because I didn't know that, to be honest.
I think it's a good point that you are making, because other research shows that consumers are becoming more and more interested in the social and environmental story behind what they are buying, not only coffee.
Tell me those stories.
Yeah, exactly. So,
okay, but as I said, that's not the main question for today.
But it's an important element because
translate.
Someone is buying your coffee.
Transparency to me. There are a lot of questions coming to us, for you. But time is not my friend today. Time is not my friend today. So I have to wrap up with, I have one question for three of you. So about 1.5 minutes per person. So when it comes, it seems that in several countries and regions that the sector is not economically viable these days, Like you can say that, And I wonder, who should take the responsibility to lead this transition so farmers can find a new way of income? So when it doesn't go well, who should take the responsibility? I started with, I would like to finish up with Vanusia, because you can judge the other two. So I start with Mario. Mario, who should take the responsibility?
Well, I was ready to say my previous colleague, which now I cannot say anymore. No, I'm sorry, I'm making a joke. No, I think that we are really in a very, very crucial situation, and so it's not really the point to find somebody, one single, let's say, company or group or association, whatever, not even a single country. It's really a collective responsibility, which is in a way something that we should create in a way a consensus on creating the condition for coffee to be as a product to be such a noble, such a let's say a good product as it is. It's a product that gives pleasure to all of us. It's not necessary. I mean, we can live without coffee, but coffee is so good that it can also be good for the people. So I think that, for example, within the ICO, which is one possible forum where we have governments, where we have private sector, etc., we could making stronger, let's say, vital activities. We can probably create the condition, maybe through the fund or through other stuff, to really be able in maybe in making a 2030, according to the goal as well, program to bring some very interesting results for the coffee sector.
Okay. In a way, Mario, it was my, idea. You kind of, avoided my question. So now I'm going No. Kind of.
No, sorry. No, but tell me where, because the last thing I want to do is to avoid the question.
Okay. Again.
Please.
Again, I will rephrase the question. Who should take responsibility to lead the transition so farmers can find a new way of income?
Well, the most, let's say, maybe unpopular, but the most correct answer for me is definitely the farmer itself, no doubt about it, because it's the farmer that should work in the best way to create the condition for living, as all of us. Okay. Find the way to make a living. Now, who can help the farmer? That's a different level. And then we're back to the collective action. We have a project, for example, one in Colombia, just to make a small example, sorry to steal another 30 seconds. In a project in Colombia, and the numbers have been made and verified by Solidaridad, which is one of the supporter of the Coffee Barometer, the income for the growers was in 2 years was increased by 40%, without considering market movement up and down of the average price level. Now, 40% increase is huge. But that, of course, means that you have to create a situation of training, a situation of offering the possibility of using certain coffee variety, and so on and so forth. Okay. So those are the activities that I think should bring.
Okay, so please allow me now to go to Juan Antonio. Juan Antonio, I'm afraid that now you have to make it shorter and more concrete because someone stole a little bit of your time. Please, go on.
Okay, but I would like to rephrase your question, because your question was asked as if asking who has the responsibility or the accountability to help the farmer get other sources of income. I think as a coffee sector, what we want is the farmer to get sufficient income, a living income from coffee, obviously diversified maybe, but from coffee. And as a coffee sector, I think I have to echo what Mario said. I think it's really a collective responsibility and accountability, for the simple reason that we're all in the same boat together. We're all part of an industry, of a supply chain. We all have a role to play, and we all have to work together to bring the solutions that are required so that the coffee sector is more sustainable, so that the more vulnerable farmers and the more vulnerable origins continue to have a place in the market, which is very key, I think, for the continued growth of the coffee market. We all want a diversified sourcing opportunity, if you want, with many countries producing many qualities and many varieties that the consumers want to drink.
Okay.
So I would have to say it's a collective accountability.
Okay. So the same question for you, Vanusia. We are all in the same boat. Who is responsible who is the captain? Who is responsible for the boat?
I think we can use. I thought, as Mario said, also ICO could be this responsible or this leader of that. But in many cases, we already realized that the diversification will be the tool and it will be key. Even the diversification inside of the property or diversification to get another job to add some income to that family. And then thinking about that, I thought that we could suggest to ITC if they could accept to be in charge of this challenge with us. They are doing many projects related to this in the world, in many of the coffee producers' country already, and with many communities, coffee communities. And I think they could be a neutral and a good organization that could lead all this process, of course, with huge support of all the sector, mainly from the traders and the industry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Now we are going to wrap up this conversation. I have one more question for the audience. And while I'm asking that question for the audience, I would like to hear from the panel members, as you are one of the members of the audience, the same question. So the question is for the audience. Now you can see, in your opinion, to what extent will the sector improve its performance in relation to the issues discussed today? So what are your hopes for the future, for the sector? Will the sector no improvement, A, small improvement in the future, or C, a significant improvement? So the question is, for the audience, please send the answers to us. In your opinion, to what extent will the sector improve its performance in relation to the issues discussed today? And while they are sending us their answer, very short, no improvement, small improvement, or significant improvement. Vanusia, which would be your answer?
My hope is letter C, of course.
Of course. And then I go to Juan Antonio.
No, I'm optimistic. I think the sector understands today much more than in the past what needs to be done. I think we have all the diagnostics. I think the commitments that companies are making in that regard are significant and increasing.
Cool.
And I am also optimistic that we will make significant improvement in the near future.
Mario, briefly.
We have to, must be C. It's not a hope, it's a must. It must be C because we have to bring such a level of let's say good impact in the coffee sector. So through all the participants, we shouldn't forget the important players like governments, like organizations, and so on and so forth, but also important issues like technology. We didn't really talk today about it, etc. But there are a lot of possible ways that will help the sector to bring prosperity, to bring good living, to bring what everybody has the right to expect from life, and not only us, but also the coffee producer, of course.
Cool. Three of you, thank you very much. Thank you for being with us from different time zones. And of course, let's not forget Caitlin Codes from New York. And now a short wrap up back in the studio. First of all, my question, the same question for you. To what extent the sector will improve its performance in relation to the issues we discussed today? No improvement, small improvement, significant improvement.
Well, I share the hope that we move to significant improvements.
No but?
No, but, although I might have to write a couple of more coffee barometers to keep everybody accountable and show the credible. On the one hand, yes, it sounds all credible and doable.
Yeah.
But we also have to be realistic and push into certain directions.
Yeah. Because you could not see what the audience have answered. To give you an idea, 60%, 60, said a small improvement. 20% said no improvement, and 20% said significant improvement. And, so we are at the end of this webinar. I wonder whether you have any final remark, and then we will just wrap up. Claire, finish.
Yeah, I think what I took from the discussion here is, of course, what we also notice in the Coffee Barometer itself is the attention currently in the sector for living income, relating living income and sustainability, which of course makes a lot of common sense. Next to that, of course, there's the whole living wage discussion, because coffee is, there are a lot of laborers involved in the coffee sector, and what we also noticed in the Coffee Barometer, there's not that much information about laborers and coffee pickers. So I think that's an area where we also need to learn more, and pretty fast, to avoid indeed to fall into the same enthusiasm that we had like 10 years ago, with everybody running around with indeed the voluntary standards initiatives and pushing for certification, that we now start pushing like living income as the big solution for everything. I think we have to be cautious about that, and really of course the urgency is high, but really move together to this.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your report. And I hope to see you in 2 years under better conditions globally, and of course when it comes to coffee. And thank you to the audience for sending us your questions. Unfortunately, I'm really sorry that we couldn't handle these questions or pass them all to the speakers, but I'm sure that this question will give us more reasons, more need to organize more webinars like this. Very good questions, but as I said, I'm very sorry I couldn't pass them to them, just only when it comes to time. And I would like finally to thank the editors behind this program, the program makers behind this program, and of course the technicians who made this nice, in my opinion, nice program possible. On that note, I would say go in peace, and I hope to see you in better conditions. Ciao.
Thank you.